So when we looked at our number sets, one of the subsets was the rational numbers. And rational numbers up until high school were called fractions, and they are exactly that. There's no difference between rational numbers and fractions. Any number that can be written as a fraction is a rational number. So here we have a over b, so 1 over 2, any kind of number like that is a rational number or a fraction, and that includes all the repeating fractions, all of the decimals that stop. The only ones that don't get included in that set are things like if you try to take 1 over root 2, let's say, on your calculator, you're going to get a decimal answer, and it's going to be one of those numbers. You remember like pi? That just keeps going on forever and ever and ever, and there's never any repeating pattern that never stops. And so those numbers don't belong to the set of rational numbers. Those belong to the set of irrational numbers, and we'll talk about that another time. So my favorite superhero, Mathman, is here today. And here's Mathman. His superpower is he does math in his head. And so he is here to ask whether or not your calculator does fractions. And if you can learn how to do fractions on your calculator, fractions are going to be easy. So what I've done is I've got a picture here of a commonly used calculator. This is just a Casio scientific calculator. Any kind of scientific calculator is good for high school and beyond. And if you make sure that it has the fraction button on it, that's this guy right here, it's going to be your best friend. And so the fraction button just says A and then B slash C. Some people's fractions buttons actually look like a fraction. They have like a little box and then on the bottom another one for the numerator and the denominator of the fraction. Either way, if you're investing in a scientific calculator, and when I say investing, I mean like $10 or $12 is as much as you need to spend, make sure it's got that ABC button on it, that fractions button on it, okay? Whenever you need to do operations with fractions, you are going to put a fraction into your calculator like this. Let's say the fraction is 3 over 4. We're going to go 3, and then we're going to hit the ABC button, and then we're going to type in 4. And what is going to appear on the screen is this. And this little backwards L symbol is how your calculator tells you that you just put a fraction in. And so it looks a little weird, but that's how it writes a fraction. If you press that ABC button again on most calculators, it will give you the decimal equivalent, 0.75. And you can go back and forth between the decimal equivalent, the fraction, and also if your fraction happens to be a improper fraction where the top is bigger than the bottom, so say we have 8 over 5, it will also write that out for you in mixed form. So you would put that in your calculator, and when you press equals, it's going to put it down. Sorry, I made a mistake there. It's going to put it down into lowest terms in mixed form for you. So 8 over 5 is 1 and 3 over 5, and that's the answer you're going to get. And as long as you know how to read that from the screen of your calculator, then you'll be able to write your answer as 1 and 3 over 5. Next to a scientific calculator, the tape measure is probably our next important math tool in terms of the things that we're going to use in the real world for math. And so fractions and tape measures are very well connected because tape measures are broken down into fractions of an inch or fractions of a centimeter if you're using metric, but lots of people still work with imperial measurement, which was the old way of measuring things in feet and inches and yards and things. And so if you are in any way thinking of working in a trade when you're out, after high school looking for your career, learning how to use a tape measure is one of the most important skills that you should try to pick up and work on when you're in high school. And that's where the math comes in, because fractions are a big part of that. So when we have a tape measure and we're measuring things, all of these little ticks on our tape measure are breaking down an inch, which is the whole numbers between, like, from 5 to 6 is 1 inch and so on. And it's breaking it down into fractions of an inch. So you can see, I think, that between 6 and 7, if we go to the halfway point, that's 6 and 1/2 of an inch. And then if we break down that 1/2 again and take a half of a half, that puts us here. And you notice how the lines are getting shorter each time? And so it's helping you to understand which fraction is being represented, because every time the line gets shorter, your denominator is getting larger. So you're getting smaller fractions of things. So a half of a half is actually a quarter. And so this represents 1/4 of an inch. And if we take a half of that again, that's this guy right here, just a slightly smaller line, and this is 1/8, so 1/8 of an inch. Some calculators actually go out to 32nds of an inch, not calculator, tape measure. This particular tape measure is measuring things to 1/16 precision, so that's 1/16 of an inch, this smallest little tick on our tape measure. So in class, we would normally all grab a tape measure and just spend the period measuring things and getting really good at that, because it's something that we're not used to doing very often when we're unless you already work in construction or those kinds of things. So when we're going out, we're measuring something, it's really important to be able to read our tape measure. Let's say that we measure something and this line is where the length of our object ends. So we can see that we have 7 inches. We can see that it's more than half of the way to 8, so it's more than half of an inch. We can see that it's not 3/4 of the way, because that's the next biggest line. And so in between 1/2 and 1/4, we have 1/8. So if we look at this and we measure it in terms of eighths, we have 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, and remember 4/8 is really the same as 1/2, so that's why we're at half of an inch, and then 5/8. And so that measurement would be 7 and 5/8 of an inch. And that's how we read those ticks on the tape measure. Let's try one more. This time I've measured my item and I've marked it with the white arrow, and I can see that this is the smallest of all of the ticks that I have on the tape measure. So I can see that I have 10 inches, but it didn't quite get all the way to 11 inches. It's more than halfway there, just a little bit more than halfway there. And if I'm on the smallest of my ticks, remember that those are 1/16 of an inch, representing 1/16 of an inch on this tape measure. I'm going to count from 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sixteenths. And that's all you have to do. If we're given if we're giving an improper fraction and asked to write it as a mixed fraction, Again, there's procedures for doing this, but you're going to use your calculator to do as much as possible for you. So we have 22 over 7, and if we put that 22 over 7 into our calculator and we press equals, the calculator's answer is going to look like this. And that looks really strange, but now that we've looked at the calculator and how it talks about fractions, we know that that means that we have a whole number of 3 and a fraction of 1 over 7. And so when we write this in mixed form, the whole number part is 3 and the fraction part is 1 over 7. Now, if I want to put an improper fraction into my calculator, if I want to put a mixed fraction, then I'm going to do it the other way around. I'm going to do 5 and then hit the ABC button and then 2 and again hit the ABC button and then 11. Now when I press equals on the calculator this time, or depending on the calculator you're working with, you might have to hit the ABC button with the second or the shift sign first. And what that actually does is gives you the improper form of it in the form D over C. You'll see that above the button on your calculator. So try that out on your calculator. And when your calculator gives you the answer 57 over 11, you'll know that you've got your calculator buttons figured out. So just practice that a few times so you don't forget, or make yourself a note as you're going through your lessons for this unit. Probably a good idea to keep a note sheet in your workbook and just make a note of some of these things so that you'll remember them when it comes time to write the test. If we're being asked to find the equivalent fraction, then we just want to make sure that the fraction we make would give us the same decimal answer as the fraction we're starting with. So we have 3 over 7, and there's a couple of ways to do this, but the easiest way to approach a question like this is if we notice that 7 times 4 is 28, we need to do the same to the top as we did to the bottom, and we just multiply by 4 and we get 12. In the second case, if we notice that 8 divided by 4 gives us 2, then we just have to think of a number that divided by 4 also gives us 3, and we just had that number in the previous example. 12 divided by 4 gives us 3. So if I put 8 over 12 into my ABC button on my calculator and press equals, that calculator will automatically put it down into lowest terms for me, so I can check my answer and make sure I'm right. Same thing over here. If I have 12 over 28 and I press equals, the calculator is now going to display 3 over 7 for us like that. So let's take a look at these fractions and see how we're going to order them from smallest to largest. One thing we could do is we could kind of group them as fractions that are over a half and fractions that are less than 1/2, and at least then we would have sort of lowest and highest groups. So if I'm looking for fractions that are less than 1/2, that would be 2 over 5. We have 1/2 right in the middle. We have 3 over 7, and that's it for fractions that are under a half. Fractions that are over a half, 2 over 3, 7 over 8, and 5 over 6. Now they're not in order, they're just grouped on either side of a half. So what else can we do to sort these fractions in a more meaningful way? Sorry, this is a 2 here. Well, one thing we could do is we could get our calculators out and we could put in 2 divided by 5 equals 0.4. And if I do the same thing with 3 divided by 7, I'm going to get 0.42. That tells me that the second number, 3 over 7, is just a little bit bigger than the first number, 2 over 5. So it turns out we had them in the right order from lowest to highest. Let's have a look at our highest numbers, the ones that are greater than 1/2. 2 over 3, if I divide 2 by 3 on my calculator, I'm going to get one of those repeating decimals. It's going to be 0.66666, and we can just put a dot over the 6 there to show that it's repeating. 7 over 8, if I divide 7 by 8, I'm going to get 0.875. And if I take 5 and I divide by 6, then I'm going to get 0.833333 repeated. And so here, it looks like we're going to have to switch our last two fractions because 7/8 is slightly bigger than 5/6. So when we write out our fractions in final form from lowest to highest, we're going to have 2 over 5, 3 over 7, 1 over 2, 2 over 3, 5 over 6, 7 over 8. Now there's other ways we could have done that. We could have tried to find a common denominator and change them all to equivalent fractions so that we could compare them. But that's a lot of work. And mathematicians are not known for wanting to do lots and lots of work, so we're going to always try to find the easy way to do things whenever we can. So that's the end of our first lesson on fractions. We'll be doing some operations with fractions in the next couple of lessons. For now, though, it's time to practice the skills that we learned in this lesson. So you can complete the worksheet and you can check your answers on D2L before moving on to lesson 3.